Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the GC Roundup presented by Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, where we keep you up to speed on everything you need to know in Gamecock Nation. I'm your host, Kendall Smith, and this week on the show, we are talking South Carolina basketball. Both the men's and women's teams bringing Gamecock Nation early Christmas presents with back-to-back wins earlier in the week. Plus, we'll talk South Carolina women's soccer. Just the third player in Gamecock women's soccer history was drafted into the NWSL earlier in the week. We'll discuss that along with South Carolina football in their upcoming bowl matchup against the UNC Tar Heels. All of that and more coming up on this week's holiday edition of the GC Roundup. You don't want to miss it, so don't go anywhere. Happy Christmas Eve, everybody, and welcome into the GC Roundup. I hope you are all having an amazing Christmas week, an amazing holiday season. I am so excited that you all are joining me today. There's so much to get to in the world of Gamecock athletics, but first I want to shout out Michael Sauls for joining me the past 2 weeks on the GC Roundup. We are now back to kind of our usual show format, so super exciting to just be sitting down with you all today. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina right now for the holiday season, for winter break, but we're still going to sit here and we're going to talk Gamecock athletics, because even though it is holiday break, that doesn't mean that South Carolina isn't rolling when it comes to sports. And when you talk about South Carolina sports rolling, the first thing that comes to mind has got to be the South Carolina women's basketball team. On Tuesday night, South Carolina took home their 5th win of the season against a top 10 opponent, their 6th win of the season against a top 15 ranked opponent, as South Carolina defeated the Stanford Cardinal on Tuesday night with a final score of 65-61, overcoming an 18-point deficit. Dawn Staley spoke after the game. Here's what she had to say on that massive comeback win for the South Carolina Gamecocks.
I mean, first of all, I think to have to come out of the locker room because we're down or we didn't play the way we needed to play, I think sometimes it just allows us to calibrate a little bit, just do the things that the habits that we created. Like with Stanford, we certainly had to defend. We allowed them to catch the ball where they wanted to catch the ball in the first half, move the ball, backdoor us. I mean, it was a clinic. And then we just made, really the biggest adjustment was just try to deny the high post.
South Carolina remains the #1 team in the country. They are still undefeated on the season. Now, speaking of South Carolina basketball wins, the men's team secured the win over Army on Wednesday night with a final score of 105-75. Now, this marks the second time in 8 days that the South Carolina men's basketball team has reached over 100 points in a game. And an even more shocking statistic that I learned thanks to our very own Colin Taylor is the fact that South Carolina hadn't scored 100 points against a Division I opponent since the 2007-2008 season against the Citadel. Now, Frank Martin spoke after South Carolina's win against Army, and it was a win that certainly didn't come easy, especially with the fact that South Carolina has lost several players as of this point in the season due to COVID-19 protocols and also due to injury. Here's what Frank Martin had to say.
We're 9-3. When you take in consideration, Bryant misses 5 games. Jermaine Cousinard's basically practiced for maybe 10 days. He missed 2 weeks, 3 weeks leading into the first game, and then he got practices in between games, and then he went down again. And those are our 2 most experienced players, and both guys career double-figure scores. And we're depending on Jacoby Wright to be at the point, and Devin Carter. You think he makes a difference? I mean, it's Josh Gray's our best ball screen big defender. We got a good team, and I'm excited. They get a break right now, and excited to hopefully we should have everybody back and geared up and ready to go for the second half of the run here.
So I don't think we've ever talked about track and field here on the GC Roundup, but that is exactly what this show is all about. Giving some love to those sports that do not get as much coverage. And earlier in the week, the South Carolina track and field team announced their 2022 schedule. They will kick off the new year at the Orange and Purple Elite, scheduled for January 8th. Now, speaking of sports that don't get a ton of coverage, earlier in the week, the South Carolina women's soccer program had their third player in program history drafted into the NWSL. In the fourth round of the NWSL draft, the Houston Dash selected Ryan Garris out of the South Carolina women's soccer team. So a huge shout out to Ryan, a huge shout out to Shelly Smith, the head coach of the South Carolina women's soccer team. What an incredible, incredible accomplishment. And I know the entire Gamecock community is super, super proud. Now, it wouldn't be a GC Roundup if we didn't talk about the South Carolina football team, and today marks 1 week from South Carolina's matchup in the Duke's Mayo Bowl against the UNC Tar Heels. If you aren't subscribed to Gamecock Central, this is the shameless plug to please subscribe. We have a huge week coming up in terms of bowl coverage, lots of fun events to cover, practices to cover here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and of course the game. You do not want to miss any of it. And earlier in the week, speaking of coverage, Gamecock Central covered the coordinators' availability. All three of the South Carolina football team's coordinators, Marcus Satterfield, Clayton White, and Pete Limbo, spoke to the media. Here's a little taste of what all three of them had to say.
Obviously, when you lose a guy like a JJ, you want to wish him well, and hopefully they making the right decision for him and his family. As far as us, we won't change anything. We just keep it going, and next man's up.
Jason gave us an element, a little bit more mobility. Could extend plays. Zeb kind of, he gets back there. He's healthy, first of all, to answer your question, but he's not going to be able to extend like Jason does. He's going to have to make his plays with his arm, like he's shown that he can do already. Earlier this season. So it's going to change a little bit. You'd like to have the availability to have a guy that could run a little bit, but Zeb's going to go out there and fight and give us what he can.
And I think we've put a good foundation in place. We need to keep developing kind of that core group of special teams guys, and hopefully in year 2, year 3, year 4, you'll really see that emerge.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the GC Roundup, presented by Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, where we keep you up to speed on everything you need to know in Gamecock Nation. I'm your host, Kendall Smith. Thank you all so much for joining me this week. Have a very, very Merry Christmas. Subscribe to Gamecock Central. Happy holidays, everybody. I'm so thankful for all of you. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you back here shortly with some more bowl coverage and, of course, next week's edition of the GC Roundup. Happy Thursday, everybody, or happy Christmas Eve, I guess I should say, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.